I'm going to introduce the panelists and then maybe have them say a little bit about themselves. But let me just first tell you how this happened. You know, I was talking to Eva and some other folks about people doing work in this time, how stressful this can be, and how we need to really take care of ourselves and stop periodically just sort of celebrate and enjoy, and then get back to work. And I talked about Glenn Harris, who is the head of Race Forward, was out here, and I said, Glenn is coming to town, and we're going to talk about work, then we're going to get a massage. And I said, you know, maybe, I mean, like, do something fun, like, go see the Black Panther. And I called Eva, and I called Angela over Blackwell, and I said, what do you guys think? And they said, yes and hell yes. So, and we don't have a lot of money, but we have a little bit. And we said, you know, do we sell tickets? I said, no, this should be a celebration for the community. And I know I'm not supposed to say this, but Eva started crying with joy. So, thank you, Eva. And I've known Eva, I mean, when we went to school together. Not grade school, but we did go to school together. So let me introduce the panelists very briefly and then have them introduce themselves. We'll talk for about 25 minutes or so, 30 minutes. And then if you need to leave, we understand that. But then we'll open up for your comments as well. We will say before you leave, if you haven't registered to vote, vote. We vote, we win. It's just that simple. We vote, we win. That means all of us. So if you're registered, then if you have a friend or a child or uncle or niece, someone who's recently incarcerated, and, you know, make sure we vote. So that, as my daughter says, so we can make this country Mexico again. But anyway. So I'm going to start with Ashara. I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name. An independent curator, creator, journalist, entrepreneur, cultural worker, consultant, and the list goes on. And then we have to the Ebone, who is a native of Oakland. She graduated from high school in Oakland. She attended college in San Francisco, works in the area of fashion and design. You think of the fashion and design in the movie, it was so beautiful, there's so much detail. And then we'll have her say a little bit more about herself. And we know Eva. Eva is the founder and president of Equal Justice Society. She's one of the partners with Haas Institute that's trying to bring issues of implicit bias and structural racism into the discourse. And it's been a stalwart in terms of fighting things like Prop 209 and making justice real. So, Eva. So we'll start with you, Ashara, though, and maybe have you say a little bit about just your reaction to the movie, anything you want to share with the audience.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. You know, we were wondering who might want to stay after 2 hours and 20 minutes of getting your mind blown. So this is the second time I've seen the film. My name is Ashara Ekundayo. I'm a cultural worker and entrepreneur. I co-founded a company 4 years ago called Impact Hub Oakland. And beautiful home that our Oakland community and people from all over the world helped us build. I'm also an embodied justice resident at the Auburn Seminary in New York City. And I have the gift of working with creators, our community every day. And my first reaction to the film, my second reaction of seeing it was just to kind of like take it in a little bit more, move a little more slowly through it. It's so strikingly beautiful. And this art form, like all art forms, allows us to remember who we can be and who we are simultaneously. And so that's what I take in first for this evening, is like, I see myself and I see my sisters and my brothers and my siblings, and I see our ancestors each moment in this, and then I remember it's a comic. So we get to be with that as well. So the imagination and our beautiful imaginary coming real for us.
rights lawyer, so I had an all militant take on the movie. We're gonna show those white supremacists that we have beauty and blah, blah, blah. And then as I thought about it before I came, I thought, well, you know, that it embodies a theme about something I think every Black person has thought of. What would have happened had we not been brought here? And it's a poignant question. And so that was part of what was going on in my head too, looking forward to that. And then the fact that it started and ended in Oakland, it was like, yes, it was just fantastic. And Ebony, I think, is going to deal with this more. But I've read a lot of things on Twitter saying, Killmonger, well, we kind of identified with him. And there's a part of me that did identify with him, the anger that you have at being brought over here and treated so badly. And the Sterling K. Brown, all I could think of was This Is Us. But his rap about how we're over-incarcerated and over-policed, and that was real too, and his anger that people from Africa didn't do more. I don't think that analysis holds up so well because there isn't a Wakanda. It is a comic character. And then a couple of other things struck me. These are just random thoughts. About a year ago, I was in Kenya, and I'm going to mispronounce the brother's name who was in Get Out, but all the costumes that they wore really reminded me of the Maasai. And the way they have their, you know, the garb. And I actually met a rhinoceros, a white rhinoceros named Kofi Annan in Kenya. And so that brought that up for me. And then the last thing I would say is, I know many of our cultures touch on ancestral strength. And I have African mask in my study. And often when I'm feeling down, I'll look up at the mask and I'll go, you expect me to do a lot here, and so I'm going to. So it really was very touching to me that being in touch with the ancestors was part of the movie, and it was really beautiful, and it made me think, okay, I'm not a crazy lady. And then the last thing I'll say is that my Gmail handle is Ms. Panther 2012. Yes!
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Ebone Carter, and I had the pleasure of meeting Eva. My mother worked for Eva for as long as I can remember. And I'm so grateful that recently we went to lunch and we got to discuss a couple of things, and that is the reason why I'm on this panel right now. And overall, the movie, this is actually my second time watching this movie. The first time I saw it was on the 16th with a friend of mine, and we saw it the first day it came out. We thought we were gonna get good seats because we're like, no, like, everyone's at work, we can go during the daytime, nobody's gonna be there. We get there, and we had to sit in separate areas. That's how crowded the theater was at the time. And this is my second time watching this movie. And as I said before, the first time I watched it, you watch it through the eyes of T'Challa, the Black Panther, the first time I watched it. The second time I watched it, I tried to watch it through the eyes of Eric Killmonger. Him being a native from Oakland was incredible. We didn't expect it. Everybody cheered just like how everyone cheered here today when we saw that. And after the movie, I spoke to my friend and I said to him, you know, Eric Killmonger was great. I totally identify with him, but X, Y, and Z. And he told me, he said, Ebony, you know the reason why you identify with Killmonger is because you know that most black males in Oakland are Killmonger. How many of us have been abandoned by our fathers? How many of us are angry? How many of us are upset here in Oakland? And if you listen to Killmonger, one of the things that he said was, his father asked him, no tears for me? And Killmonger said, everyone dies, that's the way it is out here. With no sadness, no remorse, and he carried on to do the same thing in Wakanda. And one thing I want to point out as well is that it only recently became cool to be from Wakanda. Before that, nobody wanted to be from Wakanda. Especially in Oakland, when we look at the African and point the finger and tease them from being from Wakanda. I know Wakanda isn't real, you guys. I'm just using it as a point. Okay. And I just want to say that I'm so grateful to meet all of you, especially you, Eva. I just want to thank you so much, and I love you very much.
So let me add a couple of things that stuck out to me from the movie. I mean, the movie is so layered. It's my second time seeing it as well. Many of you know I did some postgraduate research in Africa. I lived in Tanzania, and my daughter, Samita, was born in Tanzania. And so it had a special feel for me, just sort of, one of the things that's important, it was one of the first movies that was really, not just superheroes, but really Afrocentric. And it was Afrocentric without also centering whiteness. That's unusual. This was about, you know, and I love that scene where he's saying, you know, I'm the king of Wakanda. You know, I have to take care of my people. And he said, aren't all people from Africa? Aren't all people from Africa? So one of the things I like about Killmonger is that he's actually pointing out contradictions to wrestle with. Basically saying, your people are all people. We're all connected. And he's actually doing a critique of them sitting back, watching the world burn while they're comfortable. A critique I think that most of us could actually relate to on some level. So he's challenging. He wasn't a traditional villain who wants to just destroy the world and get rich. He actually cared about people. He actually was also consumed with stuff. There's a social media thing called Medium, and they came up with what they called 5 lessons from the Black Panther. I just want to read them to you very quickly. It talked about, number 1, radical activity and revolutionary empathy. Revolutionary empathy, connecting. And some of you know the work at the Haas Institute, one of our major things is about bridging. So I love that Emily talked about bridging with the world. And the second one is intergenerational wisdom. So connecting the different generations, challenging, critiquing, but also engaging and loving. The third one was restorative justice. So it wasn't just, oh yeah, I killed the bad guy. You know, it's like, no, we are still connected. And let me show you the beauty of Wakanda. And actually, we can heal you. We can get through this. So that was a very important part of the movie as well. And then, who's going to lead us out of this mess? The women shall lead the way. You know, there were many favorite scenes, but one of my favorite scenes is when the car blows up and the general snatches that spear out of the sky and then rides that thing. And then that's so cool. she was tough. And then the last one that they list was the relationship between the ancestors and all of us, and the ancestor and wisdom in all of us. 2 other things I want to mention. One was, I love the fact that this was a technologically advanced society that was still connected with nature. And even though Killmonger wanted to invert the world, it's like, okay, the bad guys, largely white guys, the colonizers, we're going to flip it around. The Panther was saying, no, we're going to do it a different way altogether. And I love that. And so I think there's a lot of layers in the movies. I love the fact that the director is from Oakland, Black Panther from Oakland. I love the cinematography done by a black woman, just beautiful. The detail, and a lot of the artwork and design was real. So those of you who haven't had a chance to dip into African art and ancestry, a lot of it was real. So I think it just opened up so many things. There was a real story there about, if you have stuff, do you share it? How do you deal with retribution? And what's the role of women? What's the role of men? What's the role of family? The last thing I'll say, again, going back to this medium, most superheroes are radical individualists. You know, they sort of go it along, starting with John Wayne, you know? And I like that this was radical collectivity. They were interconnected. And I think that's a much healthier way for the world to advance into the 21st century. Let me just have one more round. You can ask questions to each other, and then we'll open up to the audience. Any questions for each other, or one more thought?
I'm going to butcher the brother's name who was in Get Out, Daniel Kaluuya. When they were all fighting and his love, the general came up and he looked around and he saw all the black people fighting each other. And I think what he went through his head is, oh, hell no, we have to stop. And that was a very powerful moment when they just stopped fighting. So I was struck by that.
Yes, I just wanted to say one thing. Before I actually saw the movie, one of the things I really love to do is to see the opposing views of people when, especially a community full of people of color, get excited about something. You know, someone always tries to shoot it down. And so when I did my research, YouTube, I looked at a couple of videos, and the common theme that a lot of these people were saying was, well, the civil rights movement wasn't enough. Having a black Catwoman wasn't enough. Having a black Green Lantern in the animated series of Justice League wasn't enough. Black Panther is it. Suddenly black children believe they can climb on cars and climb on walls and do backflips. And one thing I want to point out about this is the people who antagonize this film know the power of media and propaganda. Before Hitler could convince anyone the Jews were evil, the first thing he did was put out propaganda. And I really believe that this movie is a start in that propaganda and in that media, not to have children of color believe they can jump on walls, bounce off cars, or beat up people, but to say, it's cool to be a scientist. It's cool to love technology. It's cool to be black. It's okay to have an all-black cast and have it work. It's okay. The best part, like Eva said, the movie director is from Oakland. How many children believe they could direct a film like that from Oakland? All right, when I was a young child, the only thing I believed was from 73rd to Eastmont. Yes, ma'am. Okay, I didn't dream about Wakanda, but because of this film, I think that this film really got certain generations excited, especially my father. He's a Marvel head, so in return, I was a Marvel head as well. So I stuck with this movie for years and years and years. And Stan Lee, one of the creators of Marvel, they asked him, what's the most anticipated movie that you're excited about? And he said, Black Panther. And I said, Black Panther? He wasn't gonna say Captain America, Thor. No, it was Black Panther. So in return, I'm just amazed, and I'm so happy that this movie is selling out. It did the best this weekend, broke history in the box office.
So I'll just make one comment, and then we're going to open it up. Although I don't know if we have mics here, and it's hard to see in this light, so we may have to improvise, or like I say, play jazz a little bit.
I want to say something about one of the things that I think is really important there's so many things important, I think, about this storytelling that's happening, but this connection to ancestry, to tradition, and to rites and ritual, the way that was shown in a way that was nourishing and nurturing to a whole community. It laid out an entire ecosystem for how that is one of the ways in which we have continued to thrive. You know, so this giving thanks, them calling comedic deities into the space and giving thanks, this connection to those who have come before us, ourselves, and those who are coming, that intergenerational conversation. It was an example of looking at collective work and responsibility, some of the principles of the Nguzo Saba, obviously all of them, actually, and creativity and purpose and faith. All of those things were present in this storytelling. And so I want us to see how those conversations that we're having around economic justice and equity, the conversations we're having around social justice and history are all wrapped in that conversation around our understanding and reverence and understanding that we are ancestors and that we are powerful in that way. And so this conversation around spirituality that I think is also offered here is, I don't want it to be pushed to the side, because we're so also excited about the technology aspect of it, but there is a history and mythology that says that those things actually exist. Okay, there's African tradition and stories in the Ifa tradition, the Dogon tradition that say that this is real as well. So as we're looking at this fantasy and seeing it as entertainment, it's also, some of it is being pulled from the actual history of African people.
Yeah. I think that's really right and really beautiful. And one of the things, again, I loved in the movie is that even as it actually showed tradition, it actually showed a tension. In fact, one of the challengers, or king, one of the things that said of it is like, you're not following tradition and you have this girl, you know, so it's like challenging that. So it was a nice tension. It wasn't just, there were a lot of tensions like that in the movie, which was really, I think, important. And then also, which you probably haven't seen, but those of you who follow Marvel, in the next Marvel, the way the trailer suggests is that the leader of the Avengers will be the Black Panther, which is also interesting, right? So it's not just leading black people, it's like leading the world, you know, maybe we could say, in this country, when we had the leader of the world, it used to be a guy named Obama. Now we have somebody else who ain't leading the world. And the racial dimensions of that is important. I mean, one of the things we're seeing in the country in terms of all the resentment and polarization is that some people couldn't get behind the fact that this Harvard graduated black man was leading the world. It's like, what's that about? And so we'd rather have somebody else. So again, I want this to be about a joyous night, but also for us to think about going forward and some of the things that were in the movie that suggesting ways of going forward. In our last 10 or 15 minutes, I want a chance to have some of you share any comments you have. So we're going to bring a mic around and roll it around. If you want to say something, I'd say stand in one of the aisles, in the middle aisles, and we'll bring the mic out to you. And yeah, if you say something, keep it very short. Yeah, I know. And also, because there are a bunch of people in the theater, so they don't want one person to dominate. So we're going to keep it very short, tell us who you are, and then make a question or comment, and keep it down to less than 60 seconds.
Very simply, where do we really go from here? What are the real rules and protocols, the road, for us to reimagine and build the world we want? Because there are people here in this room who are builders.
Thank you.
What are the next steps we can help with?
And what's your name?
Kareem Khan.
Nice.
Or actually, my real name is, family name is Pakamile Guludeko, half South African, half African American. So where do we really go from here? Not just talk about it. What are the next steps?
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Anka Sanaman. This is my second time seeing the film. The first time I was conflicted because the CIA character I felt was unnecessary. And I also was particularly devastated by the possible, or maybe not, but possible death of Eric Killmonger, and particularly because he was the same actor that played Oscar Grant. And that was difficult, I'm gonna tell you, and seeing it again tonight, it hurt just as bad. But one thing that I did realize was, in watching the film the first time, is that the two extremes, there was no right side and wrong side, but their extremes were what was not functioning. And that those two ideologies, take over the world with this technology, or let's just stay isolated, if they had come together and moved towards the center, then we would have had something to look forward to. So I'm hoping that there may be something else to come out of this. But one other thing I would like to say.
I'm asking you to keep it short.
Okay, last thing. One thing that I find was very important was yesterday I went to a discussion, and there should be community discussions about this film because it really helped me see another angle. Thank you.
Thank you.
over in the other aisle.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really short. If you could repeat the three things that you said that had to do with themes and lessons from the film. I think it started with radical activity and revolutionary empathy. If you could just say those three things again, that's my question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Eva. This is the best movie I've ever seen in my entire life, and on many different levels. And I think it should be appreciated. I know that I remember people who survived Hiroshima and Nagasaki had almost a pause, a moderated way of not speaking about the trauma that they suffered. And some didn't speak about it, almost like cage birds. And even for African Americans and people of this diaspora, there's almost this moderated embracement of truth. So the things that we see of the movie about technology and all these things, and then we see responses back to the ancestors, or calling back on the ancestors, is really ushering what's already in a people. And I think it's okay for us.
Now I'm going to ask you to stay within your minute. I mean, you opened already, but respect the other people here as well.
Okay, and the last thing is that I think it's okay without shame to just embrace the possibilities of what comes in our DNA, that African Americans in diaspora in Africa can do virtually everything. And I'm also glad it opened with the word Baba, meaning father.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for inviting us.
Tell us who you are.
I'm Binta. I'm an artist based here in Oakland and also having lived in San Francisco. I'm really, really blown away by the visual sumptuousness, the healing iconography that is going to take years to unpack. People are going to be, drawn to Africa, drawn to African American culture. Diaspora culture was like in every aspect, even that British Museum scene. So I guess my one thing is that this is a historical document. It shows the fact that it was initially a white script about a black character with some problematics about Africa as the place of origin and African Americans as fundamentally broken. These binaries don't help us, but they are important dichotomies for us to figure out. And what Ryan Coogler, as an Oakland writer and director, made of this is incredible. And I think we just need to really return to the idea of Eric and making sure that he maybe is resurrected in a different way, because we don't want to leave him there on the platform. We don't want to leave him there in the movie. And I think there's some kind of other healing aspect to the sequel. And who knows if one of you up there or one of us in the room will write other movies, other fantasies that come out of this. So I'm just really excited for Oakland and also for the Wakanda of the mind, because in a way we already possess Wakanda here, and it's kind of a reversal. We actually have all the technology. We actually have all of these things. Do we share them? So it's interesting how it kind of defies geography. So thank you.
Thank you. And some of you may know there's already a handle out there called Wakanda the Vote. Wakanda, hashtag Wakanda the Vote. So hopefully this is the beginning of something, not the end. Next one.
Good evening. Thank you again for inviting us here this evening. My name is Delane, and I have so many thoughts to share, but mine will probably only take about 20 more seconds. So I've sort of coined them in the form of headlines. So my first headline is, movie starring mostly black cast creates unintended voter turnout. Colonization killed progress. Diversity sells. New language taught and learned by most African Americans as a result of a movie. It's called Costa. A 6-year-old boy sees leaders, real and fictional, that look just like him. Oakland will be able to continue to make a change forever. And in the spirit of Wakanda,
Thank you. All right, thank you.
Hi there, my name is Austin. I want to commend you for doing this. I think it's a great event and that you did it for free, so thank you. I actually have a question for you. I want to get maybe your reaction as a panel. And you know, right at the end when Eric was dying, watching the sunset, I felt there was a really powerful moment, some things that he said there where he was offered by the Black Panther to be able to live, and he chose death, and what he said was, you know, I want you to bury me in the ocean with my ancestors because they learned, or they taught me that death was better than bondage. And I found that like really powerful, but I just wanted to get your guys' reaction to that.
Thank you. I think we have 2 more people on the line, and then we'll have one more round of the panel and let you folks go home.
Good evening. My name is Herb, as a BK Hunter. Something that really stood out to me as being a native from Oakland that really came full circle is in 1992, I believe, Tupac Shakur stood up in a courtroom and said, "We are the bastard babies," which reminded me of Eric. Another thing, Huey Newton also said in the Revolutionary Suicide that in order to stick a wrench into the capitalistic society and white supremacy, it has to happen from within. And I feel like Eric Murray was the exact person, the exact revolutionary fighting for that, along with you know, the whole theme of that. So I just feel like it was like theoretical revolution throughout the whole movie.
Thank you.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Kevin, and I also work as a parent educator in Oakland. And this is my first time seeing this film tonight. It's absolutely fantastic, and thank you guys for coming out and giving your time and hosting this amazing event tonight. I really appreciate it. But I have so many thoughts and feelings about this particular film, and one of the things that I loved about this was how powerful all the women were displayed in this film. And really, we should clap more for that, y'all, because that's really just like, y'all tried it. Y'all tried that. Yes, you should. And just how much the power of being Black really is. And I feel like with this particular movie, it's going to be able to allow us to really own and reclaim our Blackness. But one of the things I wanted to ask you was, yes, thank you. One of the things I wanted to ask you guys was, how do you feel going forward? What are your expectations for what the next sequel is going to be, and what are your hopes for that? Because I know that there were some elements in the film that could be perceived as problematic, and how we can go forward in making our voices and our stories being told in a much better cinematic way.
Thank you.
Peace. Another Panther named Huey Newton once said, "The spirit of the people is always greater than the man's technology." I wanted to ask 2 questions, and I don't want to lose that point about the spirituality. First, for you, Dr. Powell, is a question about the perception or just how the role of like implicit bias, which you often write and speak about, how this film may impact that, particularly like stereotypes of Black folks in media. And the second question is just about centering spirituality. And so, excuse me one second. How can this film help us to reclaim some of those practices?
Thank you. So I'll ask the panelists to make 2-minute comments, and then we'll close it out in response to.
So the first thing I want to speak on was the first person who asked the first question was, what can we do from here? And as a native of Oakland, I can only speak for myself, but as a youth, I went to every workshop about violence, about teen pregnancy, about violence in Oakland. I went to it all. And one thing that I wish someone did was to take me under their wing and teach me of the world beyond Oakland. The world is bigger than Oakland. And I think it is so important going forward that we take the youth under our wing wherever we are and tell them, you don't have to be an entertainer, you don't have to be a basketball player, you don't have to be an Instagram thought in order to be recognized. And I just wish someone could have told me that you can go to Kenya, you can go to Japan, you can go to Korea, you can learn the language, you can do whatever you want to do beyond entertainment. And I think that this film is a good start to show the youth. I mean, the smartest person in the movie was a young 16-year-old girl who designed Wakanda's technology. She was beautiful, she was brilliant, she wasn't loud, ignorant, unreasonable. She was none of those things. She was very brilliant, and me being a Marblehead, I mean, I would have loved to see Storm in there as well, but, you know, I'll take what I can get, right? So, I just think that showing this film to Oakland youth and really taking them under our wing where we are, and in the position where I work in a human resources office, and when we bring in people for jobs, I noticed that Black youth are ignored. They are called last for interviews. When they come in with frustrations, they're told that they're being belligerent. Nobody wants to deal with them. If we can't talk to our own people in our youth, nobody else is gonna do it for us. Okay? And one thing that I heard my father say to his friend was, if you don't watch your children, someone else will watch them for you.
I'm going to go back to warrior civil rights lawyer mode and move away from being an artist and spiritually evolved. But the first gentleman said, what do we do? We're in a war right now, and there are all kinds of organizations doing things about housing, incarceration, and the like. But we've got to go out and vote like crazy in November because there's some horrible people running our country and they are running amok. And so to me, the most important thing is not just registering to vote, but actually voting. Second thing is, a woman, I can't remember who she was, said, could there be a middle ground between kind of like being angry all the time and then kind of sitting back in Wakanda and not doing anything? It seems to me by the end of the movie, that gulf had been bridged because Wakanda came to Oakland, they went to the United Nations, they were trying to say, we're gonna use our resources for good. So I think that's important. And then the last thing, I'll piggyback on something Ebony said. I was in Kenya a year ago, and I came back even more militant and more convinced that I had to fight for our people because I saw how beautiful we were. And this movie does the same thing, so it kind of gives you more resolve, and there are people all over the world, Black people getting more militant and fierce, so watch out, world.
I'll try to quickly touch on a couple of questions or statements that were made. In terms of what I hope might be the next story or an expanded story for this Black Panther film would be unpacking the story a little bit more of the women warriors. And if those of you who have read the comic and know the storyline, there's also an underlying conversation around queerness, around lesbianism that is not touched on at all in this film. I think it could be problematized by some folks in the community. I happen to find that storyline invigorating and interesting, and that it has to be spoken as part of the community and part of who we are as African people, who we are as siblings in community. Another thing that I think I would like to unpack more is this conversation. I love how we're walking around right now since last Thursday, Wakanda Forever, and like sisters and brothers speaking to each other where they don't normally, and being really impressed by how strong and beautiful and brilliant and astute these sister warriors are. But you don't love Black women when you see us. And so this contradiction of like, what I'm hoping is that this is encouraging you to kind of rethink, like, what is my reality, not what is my kind of like fantasy of my love of the strong sister warrior, a stereotype that we have had to take on because of society, but that is actually true for all of us, but that this love and this admiration that you are kind of like embodying right now because of this film, this art piece, that you can take that on in your day-to-day life. that you can actually look at your sisters and your aunties, your mamas, your siblings, whether they be cis or trans women who are like holding up the universe and collecting and raising children in this community in Oakland and the whole Bay Area, the whole planet. So if you love Wakanda, then you need to love Black women.
So I'm trying to respond to a couple of questions, but the woo woo woo, I love that in the movie, especially because, you know, I talk about things being, it's important, I think it's important for people of all walks of life to be involved, but there are times when some voices need to be uplifted more. So when the CIA guys started talking and they got woo 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 woo, I said, yeah, go home. Yeah, exactly. And I also love what he said, oh, speech to my children, right? I'm vegetarian. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I think our charge is really big, and I think it's not just the movie. I grew up in the 60s. I grew up in Detroit. All right. And, you know, it was a time, and also I'll say this, that old saying about don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. So there's always stuff to be done. And it's not simply for them to do it, it's for us to do it. But I was growing up in Detroit when you couldn't hear Black music on the radio. And then this little bitty band, a group of band people started to play, and they were called Motown. And they just took the city, the country, and the world by storm. And it wasn't just by storm, and I won't go into great detail, but you probably know there was a fight within Motown because Berry Gordy was like, can't make white people mad. And when Marvin Gaye wanted to do What's Going On, it was like a huge fight because that might scare white people. Okay. So I guess what I'm saying is that the cultural part of the movement is real. So the 60s was all different kind of cultural songs. I just listened to Jimi Hendrix playing Star Spangled Banner and Machine Gun, which, but part of our movement is culture, but it's not the whole movement. And I guess I want to also give a shout out, frankly, and I think we should have every occupation, every walk of life open to all people, whether they're men, women, whether they're trans, straight, whether they're differently able, everything should be open. But I also want to give a shout out to our athletes. I'm going down to Atlanta to meet with NFL players who are taking a knee. It may not seem like much because they're pretty privileged positions, some of them, but they are taking a risk. And I have to say, I love the Warriors, but I really love LeBron. I mean, he just calls it as it is, talking about the president in unfiltered terms. Again, growing up with Tommy Smith, the Black Power salute, some of you may remember that. So someone asked about the reading of these, and I'll have these posted. I hope you will continue to interact, not with each other, but with the larger community about the film. But again, the first one was Radical Collectivity and Revolutionary Empathy. Revolutionary empathy. Can you be angry? Can you be upset? Can you be frustrated and still love? To me, that's what revolutionary empathy requires. The second one, intergenerational wisdom. How do we learn from the old, the young, those who are no longer here, and those who are not here yet? 7 generations. Third one was restorative justice. So even as we fight people, even if we challenge people in this war, how do we do it in a restorative way? How do we continue to hold on to their humanity, even when they sometimes have lost their humanity? And women shall lead the way in every walk of life. You know, a lot of us may know about STEM. STEAM, right? Yeah, thank you, that's right, STEAM, which brings in the cultural aspect as well. But this movie probably could do as much as any of the stuff we do. Berkeley is one of the biggest STEM schools in the country, but still more than half the PhDs in any scientific field come from historically Black colleges. And then the final one, how do we let the ancestors should always be with us. You know, to be connected to your family and to your family's family. I'm going to end with this quick story. Some of you may know I don't capitalize my name, and people oftentimes say, why you don't capitalize your name? And I'll tell you the reason, because growing up in the 60s, I'm saying, why am I carrying the slave name? And so I'm going to drop it. And I started looking for an African name. Turns out I was named after my mother's father. And I'm trying to relate to my African ancestries and about to piss my parents off. Because my mother was like, that name was good enough for my father and it's not good enough for you. So I said, okay, what if I dropped the caps? And it was also what I call my first venture into the decent yourself. How do I connect with the larger universe? And my mom said, you can drop the caps, you can put them in quotation mark, just keep the name. So that's how I got John Powell, all lowercase. But it was that intention of trying to connect with the ancestors, but also trying to connect with the present. So I want to just thank the panelists, and if you'll join me in thanking them. A special thanks to the filmmakers, and a special thanks to PolicyLink, Equal Justice Society, as of Eva Blackwell, strong black woman, Eva Paterson, my boss, and the Haas Institute. And as you leave here, I want you to commit to do something beyond just a movie. And I want to thank you not only for what you have done, but for what you will do. Good night.